In this video, I want to talk you through a specific example of how men are kind of getting fired from their corporate jobs, leaving the workforce for good, and they're kind of figuring things out for their own path and accepting the instability, the volatility, and the kind of unstable lifestyle of maybe being self-employed, living on their savings, figuring things out rather than working a corporate job where they might be unhappy. So what in this video we're going to cover, when your 9 to 5 isn't working out for you, should you quit and pursue freedom, how you can transition from a layoff to building your dream life in a kind of collapsing job market, and how men are dealing with this kind of sense of worthlessness in the corporate environment and finding something that works for them. Let's listen to this guy who worked in corporate jobs and he's transitioning into becoming a fitness coach.
So what happened last week was that I was fired from my job, my 9 to 5 job. But I'm not sad because it was a very abusive environment and it was a very toxic environment. So I have been in 3 jobs in this country, Australia, for the past almost 3 years, and all of them have been very toxic. Sometimes I think maybe it's not that they are toxic, but they're toxic according to my personality. It's very difficult for me to sit in a place, in a cubicle, 8 hours a day, every single day, five days a week, and just take orders and do some useless shit that nobody cares about. And the last job was the worst because no matter how much I worked, it was like a complete rat race, because sometimes I would work so hard and so fast and so focused, but at the end of the day they were never happy. They would say, oh, now that you can work faster and better, here are more work for you, you can do more. If I couldn't fulfill, now they would be angry at me and they would start criticizing me and giving me shit basically. So finally, after about 8 months working in that company, they told me, we don't want you. And rather than taking legal actions, I just quit because I don't have the time for it. And I think if I want to put effort into legal action, if I put the same effort in my life, I can be way more successful. I can be way happier. It's not even financial, but I can be happier. I can have more peace if I focus on myself and my life instead of fighting a legal battle.
Again, I think it's quite an interesting scenario because I see this as a growing trend, right? As a career coach, observing social trends broadly too. So he was fired from this 9 to 5 job. He mentioned that he doesn't want to deal with this type of abusive, toxic environment, sitting down all the time. And this is the thing, it reminds me, when I listen to this, it reminds me of how society tries to domesticate men and even domesticate boys in the education system, where many kids, particularly boys, would get diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, attention deficit disorder. But it's not normal for men or even boys to be sitting in one position for long periods of time, right? That's kind of creates depression. It creates a lack of body movement, which leads to mental health issues, right? And this is how the system kind of medicates or tries to medicate men being men by always saying they're kind of toxic in one sense or form, where they can't sit still and things like that, right? Men need a deeper purpose in life, and that's why I think men are not fitting in corporate, whether you just need to take orders and do pointless work. I don't think men mind working hard or even putting their lives on the line in the military, things like that, but it has to have a deeper purpose. All right, even if you're doing kind of mind-numbing work, if there's a deeper purpose, you might get through it. There's aspects of my jobs that I've done in corporate or even self-employment as a career coach where there might be elements that are a bit tedious or repetitive, but I don't mind doing it if there's a deeper purpose. But if there's not, and you just feel like you're being taken advantage of, that's when men just get fed up with their job. And if you're in an environment, which many corporate environments can be, where nothing's ever good enough, right? I think in this environment where people in general are fed constant negative messages, society's collapsing, the world's going to hell, politicians are not out for your best interest, your taxpayer money's getting wasted, higher inflation, higher crime, things like that. there's not a lot of positive reinforcement, and particularly for men, there's not a lot of positive reinforcement in this kind of toxic society. And if you're in a work environment where they're doubling down by dumping more negative reinforcement when you're already getting a lot of that in society in general, it can lead people to their breaking point or just stop caring and becoming detached, which I've encouraged you to do in some of the of recent videos. He's made the right decision to kind of become detached and say, okay, whatever, I'll just do my own thing, or I'll figure out something that works for me. I'm just not going to let this society bring me down. But also, if you think about the messaging that men get compared to women, toxic masculinity, or some sort of men being problematic or things like that, misogynistic or politically incorrect, compared to women who would be in the corporate environment or in society in general, where they're strong, brave, courageous, hashtag girl power, hashtag girl boss, all these type of narratives. Anything a man says is misogynistic or internalized misogyny, whatever you want to call it, patriarchy, whatever type of negative feedback. It's going to reach a lot of men who are just going to drop out and say, I've had enough, right? And the verbal abuse is kind of difficult to address, but in the corporate environment, particularly when it's passive aggressive or it's socially acceptable, which I've discussed before, just slightly there, some of the different narratives that are fed to men versus women. And it can take its toll, because if you're constantly dealing with little cheap shots at work, people taking little digs at you, as a man or woman, after a time it does wear its toll. It does take its toll on you, right? You can't just ignore all of it, right? And you can't speak up because they'll say, oh, it's just a small comment and you're overreacting. They try to gaslight you in that way. And what's important here is what he's focusing on here. He's not saying, oh, I'm quitting my corporate job because I don't want to be a loser working a 9 to 5. I want to be a multi-millionaire like Andrew Tate or whatever, right? He's not like, oh, I need social status. I have to buy an expensive sports car. He's not saying that. What he's saying is, I want to quit my corporate job for happiness, peace, and focusing on myself and my own life, right? I want to be very focused out on the words there, because it really gives you a good summary of what most men are thinking, right? They're not thinking, oh, I want to quit my corporate job, or I want to reorientate my life so it's more focused on family, stability, security, fitting in society, social status, a job title that's more prestigious, or the perception of others. This is a new focus of men in this society, right? It's focusing on freedom and not necessarily family, right? Now, this is the thing, this is a key message to the boomers out there, to the feminists out there, women in general, to take notes here, right? What are men actually prioritizing now in this new social paradigm where everyone's out for their own best interests? It's a transactional society. We've seen how completely corrupt the governments or leadership in the world is, governments, corporations, so-called experts. We've seen how women are conducting themselves in this society, the older generations, the boomer generation too. Every demographic of society is looking out for their best interest or what's going to pay them most. And they expected men to kind of carry the weight of that on their shoulders, right? And if what society isn't ready for is when you have millions of men looking out for their best interests, which means they're not going to be propping up single mothers. They're not going to be propping up failing corrupt governments. They're not going to keep being high wage earners in 9 to 5 jobs where the income tax is the highest. They're going to pursue self-employment where typically there is lower tax, depending on where you're located, but typically you'd pay lower tax being self-employed versus working for a company, right? Where you have to pay income tax. Typically, these men are kind of going to stop propping up the system. They're going to starve the system by, say, focusing on low tax type of opportunities, minimalism. Society isn't ready for that, right? And it's worthwhile considering, right? The other demographics outside of the working age, military age men, which would be, in my opinion, 16 to 45-year-old men, everyone outside of that demographic has been getting what they want from this system, right? Loads of government programs, their system. This demographic isn't getting anything. And now they've basically saying they're fed up. They might not word it that way, but they're fed up of carrying the burden of a broken system, right? Where they have to pick up the slack for everyone else. So the society should stop putting pressure on men to keep participating in a failing system that's rigged, and the rigged game doesn't benefit them whatsoever. It's not benefiting him to keep probably his management, who may be older generation men or women, in these kind of comfy office jobs while he picks up the slack for them. There's nothing he's getting from doing that hard work. He might as well put in less effort or take a risk and bet on himself to be a fitness and nutrition coach, which is what he's working on now. Right, and he's mentioning here choosing not to have a legal battle or even quiet quitting, right? He didn't say quiet quitting, but I'm interested in the fact that he just quit his job rather than doing the quiet quitting thing where you just stick around in a job that might be miserable and let them pay you for as long as possible until they fire you, which can be a good option. Men have just had enough, right? He'd rather just quit rather than just stick around and collect the paycheck while he builds his side business. He just said, I've had enough, I'm quitting, right? So this is the thing, there's a term, quiet quitting, loud quitting, where you make a big fuss before you do quit your job, or you just give up on the traditional path. Many men are just saying they've had enough. So it's worthwhile paying attention to what is going on in society when you've got this happening at a macro level. This isn't just a few isolated cases, it's really happening at a macro level, and it's going unnoticed and unfocused on because the system really thinks one way or another it's going to exploit men or lie to men and get away with it, right? And then every now and again they'll have a news story, oh, so many men are dropping out of college, there are less men in the workforce, but they're not going to talk about they were the cause of this issue, this system or the government, however you want, the media and the negative feedback. They're not going to say they're the cause of it. Oh, men just need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and adapt to the new gender equality dynamic. They're not picking up on all the signs that have essentially created a very negative dynamic for many people out there, right? So let's continue to listen to his story. And like I say, there's going to be key words to listen to out to here.
Doing something for myself rather than going to work every day and hate my life, hate myself, being depressed. Just be free, because for me, the most important thing in the world is freedom. And finally, I did it. I quit without even having a second option or another plan in my life. I just quit. I didn't have anything else lined up for me. So many people say if you want to do something on the side, just start from the weekends and gradually build it up. But it never works for me. I don't know if it ever works for anybody, because in real life I have never seen that scenario work for anybody, because we are so stressed out, so burnt out, working in a 9 to 5, that at the end of the week, on Saturdays and Sundays, we don't have the creativity. The only thing we can do is just washing the dishes and the clothes and do some outstanding stuff, errands and stuff that we couldn't do during the week, because during the week, when we come back home at like 5 or 6, we're just done. So I was just forcing myself to do some ab exercises and some push-ups and sometimes pull-ups and stuff, like forced, but nothing more. So I realized that if I want to achieve something, I need to focus. And other than focus, I need to have a positive energy and a belief that I can do it. I have seen many people who have been successful in doing that. So why not me? So I have a little bit of savings. And instead of jumping for another job, I was thinking to myself that I'm done. I'm done.
So this is interesting, right? So I think there's a lot of keywords to look out for here. So he's saying he's doing something for himself. Now, typically men would be motivated by tribe, gang, their community, their society, their crew, however you want to decide it, their people, right? And the thing is, I think many people, particularly men, they notice at a very primal level, that's a lost cause. Going out of your way for a company you're working for, that's a lost cause, right? Even entire countries, like you see the state of UK, Canada, Germany, lots of people are like, this is a lost cause. I'm fighting a losing battle. I speak up and I'm censored, right? I point out basic things like let's have border control and, you're going to be in jail for hate speech, things like that, right? People are going like, this is a lost cause. I'm not going to dedicate myself to a company that can fire me tomorrow, right? Or a community that's not going to help me when I need help, right? Or even a relationship where a woman can leave you and take your money, right? Or just take advantage of you, and then there's no accountability for her, but you're responsible for that situation, right? Now, people are just realizing, again, when it comes to governments, they're prioritizing people overseas, they're prioritizing migrants or overseas conflicts. You see what happened with Vance and Trump recently with their guest from an Eastern European country, right? So you're seeing all these people are taking advantage of you. You're looking at your paycheck and the amount of taxpayer money that is getting wasted from your hard work for others. And you're like, well, I'm going to look out for myself. Who's looking out for my best interests, right? I wouldn't mind working hard or even paying a decent amount of tax for a system that's functioning for me, but it's not even functioning for anything I believe or support. And the other thing he mentioned here, I don't want to hate myself, I don't want to be depressed. And men are waking up to this priority of prioritizing freedom and not family. And the fact he just quit with no options just shows you how much it kind of pushed him to the edge. Even though he's not like wording it that way, it's interesting that he is like I say, quitting with no options. Most people are like, oh, I have to play it safe. Do I have the amount of he doesn't mention he does have some savings, but people really play it safe and really put up with abusive treatment at work just until they can make it, right? And I want to mention a brief point there. He mentioned about a side hustle, right? People say, oh, you work your 9 to 5, work on your side hustle on the side. And the truth is, it is quite difficult to do that. Lots of people think, oh, well, you have a couple hours each evening. You just need 2 hours a day in the weeknights and a couple hours on a weekend to get your business up and running. It really takes a lot more time than that. It's not like you turn on the camera and start recording an Instagram video, or you just start working on your product, whatever you're going to sell or service, and you just do it on the side. It takes a lot of time and mental energy to come up with ideas, to put things together, to test it and see if it's going to work. And a lot of that can lead to burnout if you don't have that creative energy in the evenings, where people are very drained after work. You just want to maybe watch Netflix or read a book or talk to people or spend time outside after being cooped up in an office and things like that. So I agree with him there, actually, that it's very difficult to set up a side hustle, right? When your money is kind of wasted in the week when you're traveling to and from work, and your energy, your attention, and your time, or a lot of those things are very difficult to balance with a side hustle, right? And on your free time, you're kind of burnt out because you have to do your errands, you have to, take care of whatever life things you need to do, doing your laundry, meal prepping, things like that. So you really do need 6 to 12 months to focus on a side hustle if that's what you want to do, right? You need to focus on it full time for it to work. I know myself because I've been doing this as a career coach online. And another thing I want to mention there, which is similar to the music producer I mentioned in another video who transitioned from a tech job to music producing, is you need to focus, you need to have positive energy, a strong belief in yourself, and all of these things are important. I think in the 9 to 5, you've got to have some confidence and belief in yourself too, but the most important thing there is playing by the rules, playing by the social dynamics. But when you're doing your own thing, so much of it is a mindset thing of like, okay, maybe this month didn't go well, but next month will. And a very important phrase he said at the end of this little clip is, I'm done, right? Now, if you say I'm done when it comes to a particular situation, is like, oh, I'm just done with that job, I'm done with that situation. And this is an important dynamic where people reach their breaking point. Even if they don't show it, you can't see it from him, maybe some facial expressions, but this system's really pushed people too far, right? It's pushed particularly men, where they're just like, oh, I've had enough. Well, I'm not going to be miserable for the rest of my life just to have a stable job that can buy a house and have a family, when even that's risky due to layoffs, due to divorce rates being quite high. People are just saying, oh, I'm done, I'll just bet on myself. I don't mind pursuing absolute minimalism, which he's kind of having to do. He's got some other videos where through his recipes and through the way he lives, I can tell he's not buying a lot of food, right? He's eating one meal a day, he's making his own yogurt, he's doing all these type of recipes, partly to show how to cook because he's a nutrition fitness coach, but it's also because he'd rather pick absolute minimalism and throw away any social status that comes with a job and live basically like someone who's on government benefits, leave at the bare minimum just to have his freedom. And society isn't ready for men taking minimalism to that extreme, which is happening already, and society is just not going to be able to adapt because it's used to kind of exploiting and fooling men to participate in a very one-sided system. Now, if you're dealing with that type of dynamic, I do have a link in description, and I do provide career coaching to help you build a path towards freedom, outsmarting office politics, particularly being a man in the corporate environment, how to deal with that, and how to deal with promotions or layoffs in this case, or quitting your job and what to do next, so you can build financial freedom for yourself. So if we continue with this clip, let's continue to listen to what he has to say here.
Think financially, because I have the discipline, I have the willpower, and I have the energy, optimism to do that. Why not me? I have seen a lot of people, 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds, many people who have made it instead of going to a regular job and work like a slave, basically, doing something that they hate and always being criticized. Nothing makes sense. I hated the environment. The co-workers, they're not even alive. Their souls are gone. So it doesn't even make sense to me. When I was let out of the office, nobody even looked at me. Everybody was just typing. They didn't even care. They didn't even look at me or say goodbye. It's just nothing matters. They just want the paycheck. What a shitty way to live. I have been here in this country for the past 3 years. I haven't even been able to travel, just going to the beach, walk in nature, just be for myself, have a cup of tea and enjoy life, look at the weather, nature, a lot of things that I really wanted to do in my life. But the whole time I have been in front of the computer doing stuff that I don't really care about. Nobody cares about. It's not fun. You're just copying Excel files and stuff like that. And it's never ending. Because as soon as you finish something, there is something else lined up. And they force you to do something. Even if there's no work at the moment, they just come up with things. There's copy Excel files for the next 8 months, 10 months, which is not even required. But they're just thinking to themselves that we are paying this person and we need to push him to work as much as he can. It's basically like a slavery.
So like I say, when he says something like, I'm done, every man kind of has that moment where they feel like they're completely done with their particular situation. So I just want to continue that. You mentioned here essentially having the kind of discipline and the willpower to set himself up successfully. If he can do that with his fitness life, he can do that with his finances too. And I think it's interesting because every man has a moment where they've kind of had enough, or they decide to make a pivot. It could be deciding to get divorced, it could be deciding to quit a job. And I think that's kind of important and interesting when people decide to take full control over their life, even if it's quite a difficult decision. In this case, he's mentioning the negativity at work, right? It's not even the work necessarily that was an issue, even though you find parts of it repetitive. It was the general negativity, and that's something to look out for. If there's general negativity, if it's just a miserable place, even if the work's okay, I mean, depends on how well you can deal with that. Can you have a healthy kind of emotional boundary between other people's negativity and your work, or is it really going to bother you? Other things to look out for is like the awkward reactions that might happen when you leave a job, right? He mentioned when he was leaving the job and he was let out of the office, which I assume means he'd finally left his job and quit the job. People were like, just couldn't care less that he was leaving. They kind of ignored him while he was leaving. I've dealt with that one time where I was quitting a job and someone like refused to shake my hand when I put my hand out to shake their hand. This is the thing with people. You see their true colors when they don't owe you anything or you don't owe them anything and you're leaving a job. It was a bit awkward because I put my hand out to shake someone's hand when I was leaving. They just refused to. But other people were cool with me. And I didn't have any issue with them, I think. I'm not sure exactly what their issue was with me because they were just ignoring me and they could see me leaving the kind of office. But this is the type of ridiculousness you need to look out for, right? Where you're dealing with very awkward personalities in the office. And essentially what I'm saying is don't invest yourself too much in co-workers when they can be kind of awkward. And basically they're just seeing you as someone to use and exploit and even hurl verbal abuse at while you're in the corporate environment because they might be more senior than you. And what men are valuing now, and you can see it here, like I say, he hasn't mentioned having a family or anything like that once. What is he talking about? Walking in nature, sunlight, all things that are technically free. And men are very happy with minimalism. And some of the men who watch my channel, I'm sure you're aware of that. But some of the other men, you might learn that over time. You might buy some expensive things and realize you really don't care what this society thinks of you, or how they perceive you maybe more highly if you buy those nice things. And you see society, this isn't really a society whose opinion I particularly highly value, and you might feel the same way, like, oh, why would I care so much when this society is kind of heading in the wrong direction? Even if they have a good opinion of me, I don't really have a good opinion of them or value their opinion that highly anyway, right? So these are the type of things where men just want the simple things in life these days. Walking in nature, sunlight, and he mentions if you're in the office, again, you won't get a lot of that, but you have never-ending work. You complete one piece of work fast, the reward for that work is more work, right? Reward for hard work is more work. And this is the thing, if you have a corporate environment, people should operate with dignity. You shouldn't feel like a beaten down slave with tons of negative feedback, kind of mindless corporate drones that are your co-workers. And a lot of men are feeling this isn't the environment for dignified men. And it's no wonder that men get depressed, or you see men kind of feeling more isolated or feeling out of place in society, when that's just no way to live your life over the long term. And this is the thing, when it comes to worker relationships, you should place a very low value on them, because you can see how little they value you if you do leave a job and they just couldn't care less that you're leaving. And they don't care if you quit, essentially, right? They couldn't care less whether you're there or not. So that's why I recommend you keep a healthy distance between yourself and your co-workers, because they couldn't care less about you. I think that's very important to consider, because a lot of times you spend so many hours in the office, you're thinking you're developing a deeper connection with people, but end of the day, they kind of see you as kind of worthless and irrelevant to them in many cases. I think what he's mentioning here about feeling drained from his job, not having much time to kind of travel, walk in nature, have his own schedule, to live outside the 9 to 5, and that's something worthwhile considering. If your job is draining you so much that you can't spend time in your own free time to do what you want because you're always worried about the job, it's worthwhile considering why. And this is why I recommend, when you are working your job, actually, so you don't get dumped with more and more work or higher and higher standards, is find the pace that other employees are working at and work at that slow pace. Because typically, if you're working too fast, you're not going to get rewarded with more money. Just work at the slow pace that everyone else. They're always going to find never-ending busy work to dump on you. That's why it's best to work at the slower pace rather than overwork yourself and overexert yourself just for the sake of impressing management when it's not really going to pay off.
Many things that you cannot talk about with other people, with friends, family, because everybody is the same. Now you have to go to work like robots. Nobody has any like intention or intentionality in their lives. Or I would say everybody's drifting. They're just programmed to just work, save, buy a house, pay the mortgage, get married, have kids, and being unhappy. I don't want to have that life. I haven't even been looking for another job. So as soon as I left the office, I thought to myself, now I can do whatever I want. I am free. If I run out of money, I can always go back to the corporate jobs. Why not? And yeah, it's my third video right now. It's February 2025 and I have 19 followers on YouTube. So let's see what happens. I don't even mind the number of followers, but it's just I don't have anybody else to talk to because nobody understands me. You cannot talk to girls about these stuff. They are the same. Other guys, everybody's the same. So I think the best way is to just talk to the camera, post it on YouTube, and find people who think like me. Thank you so much if you have watched the video up until this point. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna record more videos. Now that I'm free, I'm aiming to record one video per day. I want to travel. I want to go to other countries. Why not? I don't want to live life in a way that I will regret later. So I'm just gonna enjoy life, and if I run out of money, I can always go back to corporate jobs. But I don't think that's gonna happen because now I'm free. I can think of many options to make money, even if it's 1/3 of or 1/4 of what I used to make. Still I can, as long as I can pay the rent and just buy food, that's okay.
So there we go, right? Men are kind of done with the gaslighting to keep them in this rig system. Boomers, feminists, beta male friends, they want to hold you down, oppress you, keep you in the system and suppress you, right? That's what I'm thinking. Like, men should rather focus on climbing the Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is like a pyramid. You can look up the term Maslow hierarchy of needs, which is like, what do you actually need to live a fulfilling life? Apart from food, water, and shelter, you need some steady income, you need some spirituality in your life, whatever that would be for you. And that's how you build a sustainable life for yourself. And many men are happy with the bare minimum, as I just discussed in earlier parts of the video. But he mentions, oh, I don't mind having 1/3 of my salary, 1/4 of my salary, as long as I can have food, water, shelter, and decent type of lifestyle, basic lifestyle, right? Men just don't GAF anymore, right? They don't give a F anymore about social status. And a lot of these people, they're just focusing on their internal purpose, if they know they can't live the standard normal life, which would be, buying a house in the suburbs and raising kids and things like that. And I think the driving force for society, like he's saying here, is what's going on. Are people thinking and living intentionally, or they focus on drifting? And if you're familiar with a book by Napoleon Hill called Outwitting the Devil, is a very popular book. And Napoleon Hill's written other popular books, Think and Grow Rich and things like that you've probably heard of. But the basic premise of that book, Outwitting the Devil, is don't be a drifter. And a drifter is someone who's basically coasting and they're procrastinating and they're never doing anything really productive. A drifter would be someone who's just like maybe wasting time going to their 9 to 5, consumed with entertainment, Netflix, things like that. They're never actually living life or achieving goals. And he mentions a good point. Like, the system is set up to make people drift and waste their life. Study for the first 20 years of their life, work for 40, and then retire for the last 10 to 20 years of their life. It's not really they're not focused on building a solid plan. Right, and if you're someone who wants to live intentionally, live a more fulfilling life of vril, if you're familiar with the term vril, and living a life of actual energy, thumos, things like that, you've probably heard of some of these words. But essentially, it means living a life where you actually have a fire and passion in your life to actually live it with purpose, rather than just going through the motions like most people, like a rat going through a rat race, or a hamster on a wheel going round and round. You need to kind of think and strike out for yourself, right? And what he's saying is you can't talk to people about these goals, these freedom goals, right? Because they're going to create so many negative feedbacks for you and try to put you back in your box. And this is such a big issue for men who feel out of place right now in society, right? Boomers are going to say stick to your 9 to 5 and just move to another company if you want more money. Most women want men with stability, so they're not going to tell you or encourage you to take risks. They're going to want you to be in a stable job so you can provide stability for their life and whatever crazy decisions they want to make. Going on holiday trips, expensive nights out and things like that, they want you to be able to fund that. They don't want you to take a risk and be minimalist. A woman is not going to be interested in that. And then so men are kind of isolated and they're thinking to themselves, because even if you discuss it with other men you're friends with, they're going to say again, get back in your box and just focus on your standard job, and you're crazy for thinking you can make a living being an online fitness nutrition coach, which he's trying to do. So I think if you have a solid plan and you have a strong work ethic, quitting your job isn't that bad, because you can continuously work to find and apply your efforts to make something to work for you, even if you have to be a minimalist for several years until you have a steady income. And I think society doesn't understand how isolated many men feel, and they just don't understand it. They don't understand men who are deciding to go their own way, if you're familiar with the phrase, right? So, like I say, men don't give a F about social status. They're happy with the bare minimum, and they're going to go out of their way to pursue freedom by any means necessary, right? Maybe in previous generations they'd sacrificed their life for their family or their legacy through having kids, but now it's a very different dynamic. And if you're interested in thinking outside the box, dealing with these difficult corporate dynamics, right? Outsmarting office politics, being a man in the corporate environment, that's something I offer through coaching programs. There's a link in the description if you want to speak with me directly. Let me know in the comments, how do you feel about this guy and what he's described about your man getting fired and leaving the workforce for good? Do you think he's making a smart decision? Would you make similar decisions as him and take a risk to bet on yourself? Do you think he's maybe a bit crazy, being a bit too risky in this situation? But I think a lot of you will relate to what he has to say, to be honest. But interesting to hear your perspective nonetheless. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you in the next video.